Let's listen to what God would have us listen to this morning and open up our Bibles to Luke chapter 15. And read along silently with me as I start at verse 11. Luke 15, verse 11. And Jesus said, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me.' So he divided his wealth between them. And not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country. And there he squandered his estate with loose living." Well, today on Father's Day, we're going to be looking at one of the greatest passages of the Bible, the prodigal son. Even those with little knowledge of the Bible know this parable. It's been studied as great literature and painted by great artists and even treasured by those who aren't Christians. And what is it that makes this story so memorable? Why do people remember it? It's not because of the son. I mean, there's been many, many, many sons and daughters who have left their home in order to enjoy the pleasures of the world. Many have come back home in ruin, having spent everything and ruined their lives. That's a common story. That's nothing unique. That happens all the time. What is remarkable about the story is the main reason Jesus had for telling it, and that is to draw attention to the incredible father. It's called the prodigal son, but it's a story about the father that is the remarkable thing. On this Father's Day, we want to look at what this parable has to say, especially to fathers that are with us here. Your grandfather, great-grandfather, father. There's a lot to say here. And how fathers need to hear this today. The fathers, in our world today, have a lot going against them and a lot of wrong ideas going against them. Carlene was watching a show on fatherhood in America, and they were discussing the fact that lots of fathers don't spend enough time with their families. And the interviewer asked a father, and the person said, "Surely you recognize that the most important thing in life is not money, right?" And the father says, "No, I believe money is the most important thing that I can gain from my family, because money attains everything in life that my family needs: happiness and health and security and comfort and opportunities." I suppose that makes a certain amount of sense, that money is important, but aren't there needs that are deeper in a child's heart than security, comfort, opportunities, and material things? The answer is yes, there are needs that are deeper than those things, and they're really the main topic of this parable. And we, as fathers, are not the only ones who need to hear this. Every single one of us needs to hear what this major need is in the lives of the people around us, and how to meet it. So today we're going to look at the parable of the prodigal son. It's not just for fathers, it's for all of us to learn from. One of the greatest stories ever told. Let's continue with the story. Look at verse 14, Luke 15, verse 14. "Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomachs with the pods that the swine were eating, but no one was giving him anything to eat." If it seems odd that a son would ask his father early for his inheritance before he died, it was odd. That was not a normal thing. But the son apparently had lost his patience, and he wanted to experience the pleasures of the world, and they figured his dad was going to die anyway, so why not just ask him for it early? And the father agrees and gives him his share of the inheritance that would happen when he dies. And he packs up everything and he leaves, and he spends it on pleasure, 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 until it was all gone. And then he finds himself with no way to keep living because everything's gone. And he decides, well, I'll return home. But what would be the reaction of his father, who spent years putting aside money for his sons, and now the son has come home having spent everything on empty pleasure? What would his father's reaction be? That's what is going on in verses 17 to 19. He's concerned about his father because he knows that he's done a terrible thing. Look at verse 17. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? But I am dying here of hunger. I will get up and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, against God, and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So the son assumed three things. Number one, my father's not going to accept me, just welcome me back home. That was a given. He'd done too many terrible things. He said, no, my father won't accept me. I've done too many terrible things. I've ruined my relationship with my father. And in order to get food and shelter, I'm going to have to go and be one of my father's hired servants. And he was willing to do it. He was that desperate. And verse 20 tells us what happened. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But his father said to his slaves, quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him. And put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fatted calf and kill it. And let us eat and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and has come to life again. And he was lost and he's been found. And they began to celebrate. So how did the father respond? It says his first emotion was compassion. Compassion. And so he ran and embraced his son and kissed him and called for four things. Four things. The best robe, a ring, a sandals, and a feast. The best robe would be kept in the household for a very, very special honored guest who has come through. A family ring, well, that celebrates all the birthrights that you have as a fully accepted offspring of the family. Sandals on the feet, only slaves went barefoot. And he didn't just get food, he got a feast. Wow. Would we be willing to do that for one of our children that went off into the world, spent everything on drugs, alcohol, sex, wild partying, and then came back home? Hi, I'm back home. His father gladly welcomed his son home. And it says why. It says here, because his father's love was not based on his son's performance. The father's love was not based on his son's performance. In your insert there, the first great lesson for fathers on Father's Day is this. Gift your children with unconditional love. Gift your children with unconditional love. It's important to define love when we say that. In your insert, love, there's many ways to say it, but here's what I'm using. Love is treating a person as special and valuable regardless of their behavior. Treating a person as special and valuable regardless of their behavior. Special, we are all created in God's image as incredible beings of great purpose and dignity and reason for living in this world, both now and in the future. We are amazing beings. Each one of us is extremely special. You've never met a person that wasn't special in that sense. All created in the image of God. And then valuable, each one of us is worth the price of the life of God's own Son. And not because we have done something great. Christ died for us when we were sinners, when we were terrible. Everyone you have ever met is valuable to God. Even the worst person you could ever think of is valuable to God and worth Christ dying in his place. When our behavior was terrible, God loved us as special and valuable in spite of it. In spite of it. So what need is deeper in a child's life than the need for security and comfort and opportunities and material needs? There is a deeper need, and the deeper need is that child's father's love. The father's love of that child is the deepest need going on. Just as a child needs food for her body to be strong, and if not, then weak and struggling, So a child needs her father's love so that she won't be weak and struggling. That's the way God designed things. There are two kinds of love, and we talked about it here. One is conditional and the other is unconditional. Unconditional love says no matter what, you are special and valuable. No matter what, you are special and valuable. You go out, you spend the family fortune on pleasure, and you come back home, and I still view you as special and valuable because my love isn't based upon your behavior. And the other type of love is conditional love. And this conditional love says, yes, you are special and valuable if you perform a certain way. If you do what I like, then I'll love you. If you don't do what I like, then I do not love you as special and valuable. And what is the effect if we fathers live that way and give conditional love upon our children? Then our child learns that they're only valuable when they do the right thing. If you do something well, Dad will love you. If you don't do something well, Dad will not love you. And nothing is more devastating in the life of a child than a parent withholding love because of the bad behavior. You don't know where you stand. You hope you're doing the right thing, and if you don't, then you're rejected, not loved. Many of you know that terrible pain. Some of you have the most deepest hurts of your life at being rejected by your father. A sense of feeling worthless in the eyes of your father. That can lead to a lifelong search of an adult seeking the acceptance of other people by performing in order to be loved. And that never stops. Father, your children need to know that you love them no matter what they do. They are special and valuable no matter how they behave. Isn't that what this father's example teaches us here? The son behaved in the worst possible way, and he still treated him as special and valuable. That's because his love was unconditional. And fathers, whether our children are right or wrong, or ugly or beautiful, or rich or poor, or they're like falling apart, they need to know, like the father in this parable, they can always go, or rather the son in this parable, that they can go to their father and he will love them because it's not based on how they behave. Now you might say, well, shouldn't there be consequences for sin? If a son acts terribly, shouldn't he be, railed on and, you just shrug it off like nothing's going on and you just ignore what happened? Well, if you notice here, that's not what the father of the story did. He did not just gloss over the son's terrible behavior. He calls it what it is. He says that his actions killed his son. He says, this son of mine was dead. He says he went out, he did these terrible things, and he actually killed himself in all practicality through his behavior. They were celebrating because the son had come back to life again. So he wasn't ignoring this. He was saying what he did was so terrible, it killed him in my eyes. And that's the second great lesson for fathers. Okay, in your insert, second great lessons for fathers is gift your children with conditional approval. Unconditional love, but conditional approval. What do I mean by that? How many times have we heard someone say, if you love me, you will accept my lifestyle no matter what it is, right? And so this person expects you to accept their sinful lifestyle and even celebrate it. If you love me, you'll accept me, just the way I am. Let me ask you, does God give us unconditional approval no matter how we behave? Adam and Eve, did God just unconditionally approve of what they did? Hey, I know you ate of the tree and broke my command. It's okay. I totally approve. Unconditional approval. No. God severely punished them, kicked them out of the garden, condemned them for what they did. It was not unconditional approval for their behavior. What about Cain when he killed his brother? No. What about David when he committed adultery? No. What about the disciples when they showed little faith? No. What about Peter when he rebuked Jesus? No. Each one of those examples was not unconditional approval of how the person behaved. God does not give us unconditional approval of our behavior. And the difference is one focuses on the person and the other focuses upon the actions of the person. Unconditional love for the person. Okay? But conditional acceptance, conditional approval of the behavior. That's the way God treats us. And that is an example for fathers as well. We need to be like God here. Unconditional love as valuable and special no matter what. But conditional approval based upon whether your actions were obeying God or not. Many times people fail to separate these two. They clump them together. So a parent gives both unconditional love and approval or both conditional love and approval. And so a child comes home and they mouthed off to the teacher at school, and the parent says, look, you are very special and valuable to me. I'm sure what you said was right and that the teacher deserved every word that you said. I never liked that teacher anyway. And there's unconditional approval and unconditional love. You acted badly and it doesn't really matter. Unconditional approval of their actions. But what does that do to the child? Does that move them forward or backwards? Let's say you were teaching your child how to read. And you say, no, that wasn't the word cat, but you know what? I'm going to give you unconditional approval anyway. Good job. How about training them to use money? No matter what decisions they make, it's great. How about cleaning their room? How about setting the table? How about driving the car? Unconditional approval no matter what you do. We don't do that. Why? Because it's destructive to our child. That's a horrible thing to do to our child. It'll mess up the child's life, your life, and the life of everyone they meet. And God is the same way. God says, I don't give you unconditional approval for everything. Fathers, we cannot give our children unconditional approval for everything. There are things to say, this is not good. This is not something that you want to do. Those actions are destructive. The other extreme is where you give unconditional, or rather conditional love and approval. Conditional love and approval. So your child mouths off at school and you say, you've always been worthless and good for nothing. And here you're just showing it again. And then what have you done? Conditional love with conditional approval. Yeah, it's good to disapprove of mouthing off to the teacher, but now you've got conditional love as well. The right way is the in between these two extremes, where you have, look, you were very wrong to speak to your teacher that way. I love you very much and you're very special to me, and I love you so much that I'm going to demand that you apologize to your teacher, and there's going to be some punishment here at home for what you did. You are very special and valuable. Your actions were terrible, and we're going to work on that so that you don't continue to act in a terrible way. That's the balance, and it's a tricky one. Fathers must never withhold their love from a disobedient child, but fathers must withhold their approval. Let me say that again. Fathers must never withhold their love from a disobedient child, but they must withhold their approval, right? That's the balance. That's what God does with us. A lot of people don't want to hear this. They say, look, God is love, and that means loves me and my actions. So stop judging me. Celebrate with me the terrible choice, sinful choice that I'm making. And they fail to distinguish the two. The truly loving thing to do for a person who's ruining their life is to help stop them, not celebrate with them. So let's bring this home. Fathers, are you being like the father in this story? And that's what we have to ask ourselves. Are we being like the father in this parable? And if not, we must change. Number one, are you giving your children the gift of unconditional love? Do your children know that if they do something wrong, their father will still view them as special and valuable? Or are there conditions on your treating them as special and valuable? You have to behave this way or I don't treat you that way. That's not the father in the story. That's not the father that we have in heaven. God says, be like my Well, Jesus says, be like the Father in heaven. Okay? Unconditional love that treats the person as special and valuable no matter what happens. If you're not doing that, change today. Be like the Father in this story. And does this just apply to fathers? No, all of us are given the command. The greatest command is to love others, God first, others second. So all of us need to be showing the same type of love of the Father to each other, unconditional love. I'm certain that you can think of someone who's unlovable in your life right now. And you put that person in your head? A person who's unlovable right now really is not a good person. How does God want you to treat them? Does God want you to give them unconditional love as a person? The answer is yes. You need to recognize that they are special and valuable to God, regardless of their behavior. That person you're thinking of is special and valuable to God, regardless of their behavior. When you're tempted to think negatively about them, you need to tell yourself this: they are special and valuable to God, regardless of their behavior. Okay? I know that they may have done horrible things. They are still special and valuable to God, regardless of their behavior, because they're created in God's image, and they were worth Jesus dying on the cross to save. That makes them innately valuable. You cannot say they are worthless and good for nothing. No. No one who Jesus died for is worthless. No one who is created in the image of God is good for nothing. Their behavior can be good for nothing. Absolutely, their behavior can be good for nothing. But the person themselves cannot be. So you must tell yourself that that unlovable person is special and valuable to God. Okay? That's number one. Number two, never accept their bad behavior as acceptable. All right? They themselves, completely unconditional love. Their bad behavior? No. You never accept that as acceptable. Look, if I love you, will I approve of you if you start drinking poison? No. You start drinking poison, I'm going to try to slap it out of your hand. Why? Because I love you. And in the same way, how about if you start living with another person outside of marriage? Or how about if you start telling lies to all sorts of people? How about if you start practicing a gay lifestyle? If I love you, I cannot celebrate or accept or permit those things in your life because they are just like poison. Sin ruins lives. And if I truly love you, I'm going to urge you, turn away from these things. The Bible says sin ruins lives. I'm never going to celebrate these things because you want to. I'm never going to celebrate you drinking poison. I'm never going to celebrate you turning and doing what God says to do. What does God command us to do when a brother or sister in Christ falls into sin? Just accept them the way they are and, just be loving? No. God says, be loving by going to them in private and urging them to turn away from their sin. That's the most loving thing that we can do for someone who is drinking a spiritual kind of poison. Help them get away from it. If you are not addressing a sin in someone else's life, or at least not expressing the fact that you're concerned about their going in the wrong direction, God wants you to change that. If you love them, you will change that. Look for an opportunity to tactfully and with compassion urge them to go God's way and away from the wrong way. You want to love them as special and valuable, but you want to treat their sin as unacceptable and urge them to move away from it. And fathers, when you do this, you give your family, your children, the true understanding of God. In God's design, it's the father in the family who reveals to his family what God is like, the key person who teaches them what God the Father is like. And if a dad is critical and demanding and judgmental and gives conditional love, then that child is going to grow up into an adult who views God as critical and demanding and very hard to please. And as I said, it'll begin a whole lifetime of seeking to please God, doing things that are pleasing God, obviously failing God from time to time, and now feeling like God doesn't love me and God doesn't accept me and God is against me and he doesn't like me anymore. and then trying this process of pleasing God, not pleasing God, and never being on God's right side. That's why fathers must model what God, our Father, is like, is that, look, regardless of your behavior, you are always special and valuable to God. Always special and valuable to God. God the Father, if you struggle with this, the Father in this parable is God the Father. Look at his great compassion and his love here. He loves you, regardless of your behavior, as special and valuable. We've said this before, but it's true. You can't do anything to cause God to love you more. You can't. God's love burns for you because you are his creation, made in his image. He sent his son to die for you. He loves you so much. There's nothing you can do to cause God to love you more. And there's no behavior you can do to cause him to love you less. He'll never approve of your bad behavior, but you as a person are special and valuable to him. You don't have to seek to earn it. He created you as special and valuable. Now, as I said, he does not approve of your bad behavior. Sin always ruins people, and so God hates your bad behavior because he loves you. Your bad behavior is destroying the person that he loves. And so he's going to urge you to turn away from it. It's not every servant on Judgment Day that's going to hear, well done, right? Who are the servants that are going to hear, well done? Well done, good and faithful servant. God's approval is conditional, but his love is unconditional for you. What if you never got this kind of love from your earthly father? What if you didn't get unconditional love from your earthly father? More common than not. Two things. Number one, you need to forgive your father. And that will probably be one of the hardest things you do in your lifetime, because a father plays such a key part of the very foundational roots of our lives. But you must let it go and forgive him. What does it accomplish for you to hold on to bitterness? What does that accomplish in you? It just pulls you down. Remember Naomi, as we studied her life, she became bitter over the loss that she experienced, became bitter at God, and she spent years living in bitterness and bitterness and bitterness until God brought her the good that he had promised would come from her loss. What she needed to do was give up her bitterness and look over it all to the coming promise of good. She could have avoided all those years of bitterness. And I would urge you to do the same thing. God allowed you to have a father who didn't do what he's supposed to do. Don't root down in bitterness over it. Look beyond him at the promise of good on the other side that God promises to all those who love him. All things work together for good, even that. So let go of the bitterness and look beyond it and keep your eyes on good is coming. There's good coming out of this. God promised good is coming. And let that fill your heart. So number one, forgive your father. Number two, go to God your Father. Go to God your Father. Realize the son in this story is you. It's each of us. Each one of us has messed up our lives. Each one of us has gone away from God and spent our time doing things that were destructive and sinful and that has ruined each one of us. And if God's love were based conditionally, we'd come home ruined, despairing, come into his presence, and he'd say, get out. No child of mine is going to act that way and expect to come home and be accepted. But that's not who you have. You have a Father who loves you unconditionally, and you and I have each messed up our lives in terrible ways. But he still has his arms open wide and says, you are special and valuable. Come to me. Let that flow over you. Let that unconditional love flow over you. That's how God feels about you. Rejoice in that and embrace it and let it be your reality. That's how God feels about you. The Father in this story is God, and the Son in this story is you. Does that mean everyone gets to go to heaven because God's such a loving Father? No. The Father in this parable loved his Son from the very beginning to the very end, but the Son only experienced his Father's love when he went home. So God the Father has his arms open wide to the world to embrace us all, but only those who go to him and cling to him are going to be the ones who receive his love and receive heaven after this life. If you have never run home to God your Father, run home today, right now in your seat there. Jesus opened up the way, the ability to go back to the Father. He is the way. He died on the cross to pay for the punishment that you deserve. God wants to forgive you completely, and if the price has been paid for, receive that gift from God the Father and run to him and embrace him with both arms. That would make this an amazing Father's Day. If you've never done that, run to God the Father and experience his love and cling to him forever. So it's called the Prodigal Son, but it's really the story about the loving Father. It teaches us how God treats us and how he wants us to treat each other, right? Not only how God treats us, but now we go treat each other the same way. Not just fathers, but each one of us. Is your love based in unconditional treatment of others? Or are you putting certain conditions on whether or not you're going to treat someone as special and valuable? If you're doing that, kill that today and act like the father in the parable. You treat others as special and valuable regardless of how they behave. But then also make sure your approval is based upon obedience to God. Everything else ruins that person that you love is so special and valuable. Never accept sin as okay. It's not. Poison's not okay. Sin's not okay. It destroys people. So make sure that you urge people to turn from sin and then only approve behavior that is faithful and obedient to God. That's behaving like the father in this parable. An example to all of us, not just fathers, every single one of us. Be like the father in this parable, and we'll be like God.